Welcome to Debt Matters. If you owe a private bank money, they generally know exactly how to find you.
Oh, absolutely. They have your whole profile.
Yeah, I mean, they assess your finances, use algorithms to kind of figure out your spending habits, and then tailor a specific payment plan. They proactively try to get you back on track before things just spiral totally out of control.
Right, because it makes financial sense for them to do that.
Exactly. But if you owe the government money, historically, you are dealing with an entity that operates entirely differently. It's this massive apparatus that has often just let debts build up in the background.
Yeah, totally out of sight.
And then suddenly, out of nowhere, they hit you with a terrifying final demand letter when the total has basically become unmanageable.
It has historically been a very blunt instrument, frankly. I mean, you have this huge institution applying a rigid sort of mathematical formula to complex human lives.
Paid or unpaid, black or white.
Right. It just assumes that, like, sending a scarier letter will magically produce funds, regardless of whether you actually have the money in your bank account.
Which brings us to what we are looking at today. Treasury has just launched its 2026 to 2030 Government Debt Management Strategy.
Yes, the new framework.
And our mission right now is to connect the dots on what this actually means. What does it mean for you, for businesses, and for the government departments tasked with handling this money?
Because honestly, this isn't just an abstract policy paper. It's a complete overhaul of how the state interacts with millions of people.
It really is. And we should probably clarify what we mean when we say government debt in this context, right?
Yeah, that's crucial. We aren't talking about national borrowing or, issuing bonds to foreign countries. We are not talking about the national deficit here.
Right. This is about everyday realities. We're talking about unpaid taxes to Revenue and Customs, benefit overpayments from the DWP, court fines, local council tax.
Don't forget various administrative fees and public loans. It touches a vast number of everyday citizens.
It really does. And if we look at the broader picture, recovering these funds is crucial for everyone. I mean, this money pays for the public services we all rely on every single day.
Exactly. We are talking about funding the NHS, keeping local schools running, repairing roads, paying for community policing. When billions of pounds go uncollected, those services face immediate shortfalls.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how government collections will actually change in practice over the next few years, we first need to break down the mechanics of this new framework.
Right. We can't just read down a list of government bullet points.
No, exactly. We need to look at how these policies will function in the real world. They're attempting a very specific balancing act here.
They are. The central tension the government is trying to resolve is how to make repayment plans more realistic and affordable for people who are genuinely struggling.
While also not letting people off the hook.
Right, while simultaneously maintaining a tough, unyielding stance against deliberate non-payment and outright fraud. It's very much a dual approach.
Support for those who need it. Strict enforcement for those trying to game the system. So, to pull that off, they've anchored this strategy on 3 core principles.
Yes, 3 main pillars.
But rather than just listing them out, let's look at how they actually trigger one another. Let's start with a scenario. Imagine someone misses a council tax payment.
Happens all the time.
Right. In the old system, they might just get a late fee added and then another until it becomes a total crisis. How does this new strategy change that mechanism?
Well, that brings us to the first principle, which is prevention. Specifically, preventing avoidable debt from growing in the first place.
Okay, and how do they actually do that?
The mechanism for doing that is better data utilization and earlier contact. So instead of waiting, say, 6 months to send a demand letter, the system is supposed to flag that mispayment immediately.
Wait, hold on. You say they want to use better data to spot struggling people early, but government departments are notorious for having terribly disjointed legacy IT systems.
Oh, absolutely. It's a known issue.
Are we really expecting the local council's parking enforcement office to seamlessly communicate with Revenue and Customs? How on earth are they going to execute that?
That is the exact friction point this strategy is trying to address. The document outlines a mandate to build what they call capability.
Which is the IT stuff.
Yeah, which is actually their third principle, but it is basically the foundation for everything else. Right now, you are absolutely right. The data is completely siloed.
Right.
A local council might not know that the person missing their council tax just lost their job, even though the Department for Work and Pensions knows it because the person just applied for universal credit.
Ah, I see.
So the new strategy demands that these departments upgrade their technology and share data securely. They need to see the full picture of a person's financial situation.
So, if they can get the computers to actually talk to each other, what happens next? If the data flags that a person's income just dropped, how does the government respond differently than they used to?
That is where the second principle kicks in. Fair and consistent resolution based on actual affordability.
Okay, affordability.
Yeah, let's look at the psychology of debt collection for a second. Behavioral economists have studied this extensively. When a person is already, say, skipping meals to pay for heating.
Right. They're already stressed.
Exactly. And then a government envelope with big red lettering arrives demanding £500 immediately. The human brain perceives that as a predator.
The threat response kicks in. Fight or flight.
Precisely. But there is no physical way to fight or flee, so they freeze. They shove the letter in a drawer. They don't answer the phone.
Because it's just too much to process.
Yeah. The government's historic approach practically guaranteed non-compliance from vulnerable people because it just completely overwhelmed them.
It sounds like the previous method was essentially a broken calculator. It assumed a purely rational actor who just, I don't know, needed a scarier piece of mail to suddenly find money that simply did not exist.
That's spot on. And from a purely mathematical standpoint, it is incredibly inefficient.
How so?
Well, the government spends taxpayer money sending enforcement agents to collect from a bank account that has a balance of zero. It is a massive sunk cost fallacy.
Right, you can't get blood from a stone.
Exactly. Chasing unpayable debt wastes public resources. This new principle of affordability means assessing what a person can actually pay back each month, even if it is just £5.
Just to keep them engaged without pushing them into a deeper financial crisis. I'm listening to how these mechanisms work together, and an analogy comes to mind. It sounds like the government is trying to move away from being a blind meter reader to being a smart meter provider.
Oh, I like that. How do you mean?
Well, think about a traditional blind utility provider, right?
Yeah.
They only check your house's water usage once a year.
Sure.
If you had a pipe burst in January, they don't notice until December. And then they send you a massive unpayable bill for thousands of pounds and threaten to cut off your water.
Right. Far too late to actually help.
Exactly. But a smart meter provider tracks the data in real time. If they see your usage suddenly spike on a Tuesday, they send you an automated text message on Wednesday saying, "Hey, we noticed an anomaly. Do you have a leak? Let's figure this out before your bill gets out of hand."
What's fascinating here is that the Treasury's strategy document strongly suggests exactly that kind of shift.
Really?
Yes. By stating these new objectives so clearly, it signals a structural move away from that blind meter reader model. It acknowledges that proactive, personalized intervention yields a far better financial return for the taxpayer than letting the pipes burst and trying to collect on the damage later.
I want to push back a bit on the historical context, though. If the government is making this major push to modernize with better data and early engagement now, does that openly admit their previous methods were actively harmful?
It's a fair question.
Were they just knowingly waiting for people to hit a brick wall?
Well, the policy doesn't explicitly self-flagellate, but the implication is undeniable. By emphasizing compassion and preventing avoidable debt, they're recognizing that the old system of escalating penalties often created a doom loop.
A doom loop.
Yeah. A person owes £100, they can't pay. The government adds a £50 late fee. Now they owe £150.
Which makes no sense if they couldn't pay the 100 in the first place.
Exactly. If they couldn't pay the original amount, adding a penalty fee mathematically guarantees they will default again. The new framework attempts to break that specific cycle.
Here is where the rubber meets the road, though. We have these principles on paper. We understand the mechanics of data sharing and affordability.
Right.
But how is the actual collections industry, the people who do this complex work day in and day out, responding to this updated government playbook?
Well, the timing of the publication tells us a lot about the intended message. The Treasury purposefully published the strategy during Debt Awareness Week.
Which is an annual campaign led by the Step Change Debt Charity, right?
Correct. And Step Change came out and publicly praised the strategy. They were particularly vocal about the focus on fairness and the emphasis on early intervention.
That makes sense.
From their perspective on the front lines, they see the fallout of that freeze response every single day. People come to them with multiple government debts from different departments, all demanding different payment plans simultaneously.
Which has to be a nightmare to navigate.
It is. So Step Change supported the stated goal of preventing problem debt before it becomes unmanageable, mostly because it directly aligns with their own advisory practices.
Okay, so the debt advice sector, the charities helping the public, they are on board. But what about the debt collectors themselves? The agency's contracted to actually recover these funds.
The Credit Services Association, which represents the wider collections industry in the UK, also supported the trajectory of the announcement.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they specifically highlighted the necessity of early engagement, modern technology, and having specialist support in place. For them, these are not just nice-to-have features or PR buzzwords. They are essential tools for effective recovery in a modern economy.
I have to ask a highly critical question here, though.
Yeah.
You might be listening to this thinking, I have dealt with government bureaucracies, and there is absolutely no way they are suddenly going to become compassionate and highly efficient.
A very natural reaction.
Right. But beyond the skepticism of execution, there is a policy question. When a government starts using softer, more supportive language, talking about affordability assessments and compassion, does that equate to a weaker stance on debt collection overall?
That's the fear.
Are they just going soft on people who owe the public money?
It is a valid concern, and it is a political vulnerability the government directly anticipated. Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Lucy Rigby, was very explicit about making a structural distinction.
What did she say?
She clarified that while the aim is absolutely fair treatment and manageable repayment for those in genuine distress, the government will still actively protect taxpayers.
How do they actually differentiate that, though? How does a computer system know the difference between someone who needs compassion and someone who needs strict enforcement?
By using that exact same data sharing capability we discussed earlier to heavily pursue those who intentionally avoid payment or commit fraud. It's about separating can't pay from won't pay.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's look at the mechanics. If HM Revenue and Customs sees a self-employed plumber whose invoice is completely dried up 3 months ago and their bank accounts reflect zero incoming cash, the data shows a can't pay scenario.
So that's when the supportive framework kicks in.
Exactly. But what about the other side of the coin? Imagine HMRC is looking at a company director who declares zero personal income, thereby avoiding income tax, but the data shows massive dividends being funneled into a spouse's offshore account.
Or they see luxury vehicles registered to the address.
Exactly. That is a won't pay scenario. The compassion gets turned off. The strategy relies on making a very sharp, data-driven distinction. The supportive framework is for the person who lost their job and literally cannot afford their council tax this month.
It is not for the person hiding assets or deliberately evading their legal obligations.
Spot on.
So we are essentially looking at building a softer front door for people who genuinely need help, backed up by a reinforced steel wall for those actively trying to cheat the system.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Let's bring this policy down to the practical takeaways for you listening right now. What are the real-world outcomes we should expect to see between now and 2030? How does this change the landscape?
Well, for people currently in debt to the government or who might fall into it due to unexpected life events, the most immediate outcome should be clearer routes to support.
So better communication.
Exactly. You should expect communication that offers a pathway to a manageable arrangement, rather than just an escalating series of demands and late fees. The letters should change. The tone of the phone calls should change.
And for the government departments themselves, the ones actually tasked with implementing this huge overhaul.
Immense sustained pressure to modernize. They are now mandated by the Treasury to upgrade how debt is identified, how they communicate with the public, and how they collect.
Meaning the old IT systems have to go.
Yeah, they have to replace the legacy systems that send out automatic red letters with systems that can pause, assess data, and route a vulnerable person to a real human specialist.
I imagine this also sets a reinforced standard for the wider collections sector. If the government, which is the largest collector of debt in the entire country, is prioritizing affordability and consistency as core operational practices, it basically cements those methods as the undisputed industry standard.
Precisely. It shifts the baseline expectation for how debt recovery should function across the board.
It proves that you don't need to rely on intimidation to recover funds. It makes those practices the baseline expectation, rather than just optional extras for private companies trying to look good.
Yeah. If the state can implement affordability checks and data-driven early intervention, a private telecom company or a high street bank has literally no excuse for not doing the same.
This is one of those policy documents that may sound a bit dry or bureaucratic at first glance, but it outlines a very real, tangible effect on how millions of interactions will play out across the public sector over the next few years,
Absolutely. It touches the lives of the most vulnerable, and it affects the funding of the services we all use.
which is huge.
It is, but this raises an incredibly vital question, though, and it is something I want to leave you with to mull over. The strategy promises a truly joined-up approach.
Meaning consistent, fair treatment across various government departments by the year 2030.
Yes, but think about the sheer vastness of the public sector.
It is massive. We are talking about hundreds of distinct entities.
Exactly. You have local councils handling parking fines, HM revenue and customs dealing with national taxes, the Department for Work and Pensions managing complex benefit calculations.
All operating with completely different legacy IT systems.
Right. Different budgets, different internal cultures. How seamlessly will these entirely separate departments actually be able to share highly sensitive financial data and upgrade their technology?
That is the ultimate hurdle. I mean, the theory is sound, but the execution requires a level of technological harmony that the public sector rarely achieves.
Rarely, if ever.
Can they actually make this compassionate, tailored approach a reality across every single touch point without accidentally letting the deliberate evaders slip through the cracks of a disjointed IT network?
Going back to our earlier thought, they recognize that the old binary calculator is broken when it comes to human lives. But building a smarter, fully connected system to replace it, that is a massive logistical mountain to climb.
It really is.
The wires could very easily get crossed, data could be misinterpreted, a can't-pay citizen could still end up getting trapped in a won't-pay enforcement algorithm if the data isn't perfectly clean.
We will definitely be watching to see if they can pull it off and truly modernize the mechanics of public collections without leaving anyone behind. Thank you for joining us as we navigated these complex realities, and we will catch you next time.